I grew up in a house where love didn't come with conditions. My mom, Rosa, always told me that being a woman didn't mean being someone's servant. She worked hard. She was a nurse, a single mom for most of my childhood, and still made time to raise me with values that challenged everything our culture often expects from women. We're both Latina, and I know how traditional some of our customs can be, but she made a point of breaking that cycle. She never made me cook or clean just because I was a girl. Instead, she encouraged me to study, explore my interests, and learn to be independent. "You are no one's maid," she used to say. "Your worth isn't in how well you fold towels or season food." And I believed her. I still do. In school, I noticed how some of my friends were already being groomed to be wives at 13. They had chores timed to the minute, expected to serve their brothers and uncles before they even had a chance to eat. I remember coming home one day, asking my mom if I should be doing that too. She looked at me and said, "You don't owe anyone that kind of loyalty, especially not just because you're a woman." So I grew up seeing domestic tasks not as a duty, but a choice. If I cooked, it was because I wanted to. If I cleaned, it was for myself. There was no guilt, no pressure, no shame. And I carried that with me into adulthood. I've always believed that love should come with respect, not expectations that one person sacrifices themselves more than the other. That was my normal. That was my truth. So when I met Miguel and things started getting serious, I didn't expect this part of me would ever be a problem, but I was wrong. I met Miguel at a mutual friend's barbecue. He was charming without trying too hard, polite without being fake. We spent most of the evening talking in the corner, laughing about how bad the grilled chicken was and bonding over our shared taste in music. He asked for my number before we left, and by the next weekend, we were already planning our first real date. From the start, everything felt easy with him. We had great chemistry, and it didn't take long for us to get comfortable with each other. Miguel was attentive and funny, always finding ways to make me smile. When we started dating, I felt like I had finally found someone who genuinely respected me. He never acted entitled, never made me feel like I had to prove anything to be worth loving. Over time, our families got involved. He met my mom and immediately won her over with his manners. She said he reminded her of my dad when they were younger, sweet, soft-spoken, and serious about his intentions. I met his family too, and I'll admit I was nervous. I had heard stories about how traditional they were, especially his mom, Dona Lucia. But they were warm, welcoming, and seemed genuinely happy to get to know me. We'd been together for about 2 years when he brought up the topic of marriage. It wasn't a proposal, more like a preview of what he saw for our future. I wasn't against the idea. In fact, I could picture a life with him, sharing a home, building something solid, maybe even a family down the road. Up to that point, there hadn't been any red flags. Sure, I noticed little differences here and there. How his sisters were always the ones doing the dishes during family dinners. How his mom would fuss over every man at the table like it was the 1950s. But I didn't think too much of it. I assumed Miguel and I were on the same page. Turns out, we weren't. The more time I spent with Miguel's family, the more I noticed how different our upbringings really were. On the surface, we shared the same cultural background, same language, same food, same traditions on holidays. But underneath all that, the values were like night and day. In his household, the women moved like clockwork. His mom, his sisters, even his aunts. They were always on their feet during family gatherings, preparing food, serving plates, refilling drinks, clearing the table, doing dishes. Meanwhile, the men sat comfortably, watching TV or talking loudly in the living room, as if it never even occurred to them to offer help. At first, I thought it was just a one-time thing. Maybe they were being extra hospitable because I was there, but the pattern repeated itself every time. And what shocked me the most was that no one seemed to mind. Not the women doing everything, not the men doing nothing. It was just normal to them. My mom raised me to see housework as a shared responsibility, something that had nothing to do with gender. So watching this dynamic play out over and over again made me uncomfortable. Still, I stayed quiet. I didn't want to be disrespectful or seem like I was judging anyone. I kept telling myself, it's their family, their rules. As long as Miguel doesn't expect this from me, it's fine. But something inside me kept turning. I started noticing how Miguel would lightly tease me for not knowing how to make certain dishes, or how he'd joke that I'd have to step up once we were married. He always said it with a smile, so I laughed it off. But a tiny voice inside me kept asking, is he really joking? Back at home, my mom would check in with me, asking how things were going. I never mentioned those comments. I didn't want to admit that the perfect image I had of our relationship was starting to crack, just a little, but enough for me to feel it. It happened one Sunday afternoon at Miguel's parents' house. We had just finished lunch: rice, beans, roast chicken, salad, the kind of home-cooked meal that takes hours to prepare. I had offered to bring dessert, so I baked a cake the night before, thinking that was enough to contribute. After we finished eating, I got up to help clear the plates. But before I could reach the table, Dona Lucia called out, "Querida, pode vir aqui na cozinha, por favor?" Her tone was kind, but it carried an unspoken expectation. I followed her in, and there were already two of Miguel's sisters scrubbing pans and organizing leftovers. She handed me a dishcloth and said, "You don't mind helping with the dishes, right? It's good practice." I froze for half a second. That sentence hit me harder than it should have. Good practice? Practice for what? Being their maid? Their in-house chef? But I didn't want to cause a scene, so I nodded and got to work. Still, my mind was spinning. None of the men had moved a finger. Miguel was in the living room laughing with his dad, and I was in the kitchen, elbow deep in someone else's mess because apparently that's what a good woman does. After we got home, I brought it up, gently. I told him it felt unfair that I was expected to help clean up while none of the guys lifted a finger. He just shrugged. "That's how it's always been," he said. "They're just old school. No one's forcing you." But I didn't feel like I could say no. Miguel looked confused. "Babe, it's not a big deal. They liked you helping. It shows respect." Respect? To who? I didn't say it out loud, but something cracked inside me that day. That was the first moment I realized. Maybe we didn't share the same definition of what respect looks like in a relationship. A few weeks later, we were lying in bed, talking about random things, when the conversation drifted to the future again. Miguel asked what I imagined our day-to-day life would look like if we moved in together. I smiled and said, "Well, we'd split chores, cook together, take turns doing the groceries. Normal stuff." I meant it lightheartedly, but he didn't laugh. "No, but you'd cook most of the time, right?" he asked. I paused. "I mean, I don't mind cooking sometimes, but I'd expect you to help too." He shook his head, half joking, half serious. "Nah, babe. If we're living together and you're gonna be my wife one day, you'll take care of that." My mom cooked every day for my dad. That's how it works. I looked at him for a second, unsure if I heard him right. "Wait, so you expect me to cook for you every day?" "Yeah, and for my mom too when she's over. She's not going to come to our house and not be treated right." That was the moment everything shifted. "Hold on. You expect me to cook for your mom?" "Well, yeah. She's my mom. She raised me. You should want to take care of her, out of respect." I felt this heat rising in my chest. Not anger exactly, but disbelief. "Miguel, I'm not cooking for your mom. I'll be kind, I'll treat her well, but I'm not taking on that role. That's not me." He sat up in bed, staring at me like I had just insulted his entire bloodline. "Are you serious? That's how you show love and respect in my family." "And in mine," I said quietly. "We show love by not forcing women to become servants." His face changed. "So you're calling my mom a servant now?" "No, I'm saying I'm not her, and I'm not going to become her. That was the beginning of the real fight. Neither of us raised our voices, but every word hit harder than the last. For the first time, I could feel a wall going up between us, and I wasn't sure either of us wanted to climb over it. The next morning, things were tense. Miguel barely spoke to me during breakfast. I thought maybe he just needed time to cool off, but when I tried to bring it up again, he didn't let it slide. He looked at me and said, "I don't get how you think refusing to cook for my mom isn't disrespectful. She's a good woman. She's always been kind to you." "I never said she wasn't," I answered. "But kindness doesn't mean I owe her something. Respect isn't measured by how many meals I make." Miguel stood up from the table. "In my family it is. It's tradition. It's how things are done. You come into someone's home. You bring food. You marry into a family. You show care with food. That's how love works. And in my family," I said, trying to stay calm, "you show love by being present, by listening, by not expecting someone to serve you. It's not about what's on the table. It's about how people treat each other." He crossed his arms. "So what? Now my family's way is wrong." "I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's not my way, and I don't want to be forced into a role I never agreed to. Why is that so hard to understand?" He just shook his head. "You're twisting things. You're making this into a personal attack when all I asked for was a simple gesture of respect." I could feel myself starting to tremble, not from fear, but from frustration. "It's not a gesture if I'm being told I have to do it. That's an obligation. That's pressure." His voice dropped, cold and steady. "Then maybe we're not compatible. Because I want a wife who respects my family. And if you can't do that, I don't know." There it was. Not a threat, but a warning. A crack in the foundation we had spent 2 years building. I sat there in silence, staring at my half-eaten toast, wondering how a conversation about food had turned into a conversation about our entire future. The days that followed were like walking on a tightrope. Miguel wasn't angry exactly, but he was distant. The way he looked at me had changed. Less warmth, more calculation. Every conversation felt loaded, like he was testing my limits, waiting for me to come around. One night, we were driving back from a family gathering. I had made an excuse to avoid helping in the kitchen again, and I could feel the tension simmering on the ride home. Finally, he said, "You know, my mom noticed you didn't help again." I sighed. "Of course she did. She asked me if you're really serious about this relationship." My heart dropped. "So now she's questioning whether I love you because I didn't wash dishes? She thinks it says a lot about your intentions. And honestly, I'm starting to wonder too." That stung more than I expected. "Are you kidding me?" "No, I'm not. I just don't understand why this is such a big deal to you. It's not like I'm asking you to do it every day." "That's exactly the problem, Miguel. You don't get why it matters to me. You don't even want to understand." He tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "I want a woman who fits into my life, not someone constantly trying to fight everything my family believes in. So I'm supposed to just give up who I am? Just to fit your mold? You're making it sound like I'm asking for something crazy. To me, it is crazy. I didn't grow up believing a woman's worth was in her ability to serve. I'm not going to pretend I'm okay with that just to keep the peace." He didn't respond. The silence said enough. After that night, the conversations grew colder. He didn't say it outright, but I felt the clock ticking. Like every day I stood firm, he was counting down to a decision he didn't want to make, but would if I didn't change. And I wasn't going to. After one especially tense night, I called my mom. I didn't plan to dump everything on her, but the moment I heard her voice, I broke. I told her everything. About Miguel, about his mom, about the expectations, the pressure, the veiled threats. I expected her to tell me to stay calm, to try compromising. But she didn't. Instead, she said, "Mija, no. Absolutely not." I was surprised by how firm she was. "You didn't raise me for this," she continued. You think I worked double shifts and sacrificed everything just to see you reduced to someone else's shadow? You are not a cook. You are not a maid. You are not here to make anyone else feel like a king. I told her I didn't want to break up with Miguel, that I loved him, that this wasn't just about food, it was about everything. She paused. Then he has to love you as you are, not who his mom wants you to be. If he wants someone to serve her, he should marry a servant, not a partner. Her words hit me hard, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. I realized then how much of myself I had already been bending to make this relationship work, and it was never enough. I asked her if she thought I was being stubborn, if maybe I was the one refusing to adapt. No, she said, you're drawing a boundary, and boundaries are healthy. If he's offended by that, then he's not seeing you. He's seeing what he wants you to become. I sat with that for a long time after we hung up. All this time, I thought love meant compromise, but maybe it also meant standing your ground when your identity was on the line. And I wasn't sure Miguel could see that. I wasn't sure he wanted to. It all came to a head one Friday night. We were sitting on the couch, barely talking, when Miguel finally said, "I need an answer." I looked up from my phone. Answer to what? You know what. About my mom, about the future, about whether you're actually willing to be part of this family. My stomach dropped. So this is it? You're giving me an ultimatum? He didn't flinch. I'm not trying to pressure you, but I can't marry someone who doesn't respect my mother. I do respect her, I said firmly, but respecting her doesn't mean becoming her personal chef. That's not love, that's obligation. She never asked you to be her chef. No, but you did. For her. You made it clear that's what you expect. And I've told you over and over again, I'm not that person. He leaned back and crossed his arms. Then maybe we've reached the end of this. I stared at him, stunned. I couldn't believe how quickly the conversation turned. There was no warmth in his voice, no sadness. Just resignation, like he had already decided I wasn't worth fighting for unless I bent. I stood up slowly. I'm not going to be someone I'm not. If that means we break up, then so be it. He didn't say anything, just sat there, silent, eyes fixed on the floor. I grabbed my bag and walked to the door. My heart was racing, my chest tight. I didn't want it to end this way. But I also couldn't give in to something that went against everything I stood for. I stopped before leaving. I accepted you for who you are, Miguel. I embraced your family, even when it was uncomfortable. But you couldn't do the same for me. He looked up, but didn't speak. That was the last time I saw him in that apartment. It's been a few weeks since that night, and I still replay the conversation in my head. Sometimes I wonder if I could have said it differently. Softer. Maybe eased him into understanding me instead of standing my ground so sharply. But then I think, why should I have to soften my truth for someone who wouldn't bend even a little for me? I didn't break up with Miguel because I stopped loving him. I broke up with him because I couldn't love myself and live the way he expected me to. Because if cooking for his mom became a condition of being respected, then what would come next? Cleaning for his dad? Serving his uncles? Giving up parts of myself piece by piece until I became someone I didn't recognize? And I know what some people might think. That it's just food, just a tradition, just one small thing to keep peace in the family. But to me, it wasn't small. It was a symbol of something much bigger, of expectations that I had never agreed to, of roles I was never meant to play. I wasn't raised to be submissive. I was raised to be strong. And standing up for that meant walking away from someone I thought I'd spend my life with. The worst part? I still miss him. I miss the version of us that existed before this wedge drove into our future. I wish he could have loved me without conditions. But he couldn't. Now I'm left wondering, was I being too rigid? Too proud? Could I have handled it differently? Or was I right to draw the line? So here I am, asking you, Was I the asshole for refusing to cook for his mom? Or was I just someone who knew her limits and stuck to them?